Hey there, everyone. This is Gregg Schutze for ReadyForTheDraft.com, bringing another episode of the Ready for the Draft podcast after a 1-week break on vacation out in Southern California. My wife and I got to go visit friends and family. Also got to take in a USC-Utah game, which we'll be recapping here in just a little bit. So we'll be bringing recaps of weeks 3 and 4, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at what week 5 matchups I'll be most interested in watching as we move forward. So before we jump into the last couple of weeks and what we've been looking at, let's talk a little bit about Melvin Gordon for the Los Angeles Chargers. We're talking about running backs, the Jonathan Taylors, the Travis Etiennes, the DeAndre Swifts, guys like that. When you're looking at a running back and, the different tiers and the different levels, Ezekiel Elliott, Le'Veon Bell, there's that level. There's a certain level that they've achieved during their career to this point. The Le'Veon Bell was the heart and soul of the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. Same goes for Ezekiel Elliott with the Dallas Cowboys. You look at that, Melvin Gordon was a tier below. So when he was off the field with his holdout, if you're talking about him not being on the same level as those two guys, what really can he do to elevate himself and elevate his stock? It's going to be out there on the field. Austin Eckler, only 60 yards, I believe, on the ground against the Lions, and only 39 yards, I believe, against the Texans. So not necessarily getting the job done on the ground, although he's an excellent pass catcher. What if Melvin Gordon, after this week, say the Chargers go 1-3 during the 4-game stretch? If he waited until week 10 of the season, who knows where the Chargers would be? Who knows what, in terms of proving his worth, would he still be talked about as that guy on that one peg below Le'Veon Bell and Ezekiel Elliott? How can he really prove his worth? Well, during that time, when he comes back onto the field, say they go from 1-3 to 6-3. During a 5-game stretch when he's back on the field. Suddenly he's running the ball 125 yards per game. Say he gets into the end zone once or twice, in each of those games. You look at that running game allows to, take some pressure off Phillip Rivers. That offensive line, starts getting a little bit of momentum as well. Ball control, time of possession ends up allowing that defense to take some breaks there so that they're able to sustain some drives, allow the defense to really regroup there on the sideline and recharge. A lot can happen with Melvin Gordon taking the field. He'll be able to prove his worth, I believe, out there on the field beginning in week number 5 in the NFL season. I think he has more of a chance to really prove his worth out on the field than if he were to continue the holdout. I've heard a lot of people talk about holdouts, and if you're in that next echelon below, best way to really do that and prove your worth is going to be out there on the football field. We've already seen a 1-2 record there with the Chargers. What if they go 1-3 without Melvin Gordon? Suddenly they go 6-3 with Melvin Gordon in the lineup. And he's able to really transform the offense, and suddenly the defense is playing better, as I said, then I think that's really where you can prove your worth. And then a lot of people have talked about Dak Prescott and where he's at. You look at Jared Goff, you look at Carson Wentz and the contracts that they signed. Dak Prescott, right now, you look at Dallas, they've brought in, they've signed Ezekiel Elliott, they've signed Jalen Smith, they've signed La'el Collins. Dak Prescott hasn't received the money. He's been asking for $40 million. Jerry Jones may have looked at that and said, you know what? Let's hold off on this right now. Let's have Dak prove his worth. Prove that he's really worth the $40 million. Let's offer him 30 plus. But for him to really be the next quarterback on the list, that may not be the best quarterback in the league. Is he really truly worth that $40 million a year? That's really, I don't see that out of Dak Prescott up to this season. I didn't see enough consistency out of him. And really, when Ezekiel Elliott was out of the lineup, that offense was a lot different. And I thought, Dak Prescott at times looked a little bit more pedestrian. What Dak Prescott has done this year to this point on the football field, he has proven to be one of the elite quarterbacks in the NFL. And I mean, you think about that. One of the elite quarterbacks, suddenly he is proving his worth. And Jerry Jones, you know what? He's going to pay Dak Prescott. So a lot of people I've heard, people talking, Stephen A. Smith on ESPN, went out and said on his radio show that, Dak Prescott, you're making him, go out and continue to play. What if he gets injured? Well, the fact of the matter is if you want that $40 million, we're not just going to hand that to you. I think that's the way that Jerry Jones was looking at it. Was he worth the $40 million? I would argue no. Up to this point, this season, no, he wouldn't be worth that $40 million. He's proven his worth. He's proven that he deserves that contract. And I think Jerry Jones, sooner rather than later should have him signed to a long-term deal. I would expect him to get that done by mid-season. At this point, I think really when you're talking about worth, when you're looking at a lot of these different things, Dak Prescott was a 4th round pick. So when we talk about quarterbacks, Gardner Minshew was a 6th round pick, and he's outplaying the Kyler Murrays and company. Dwayne Haskins hasn't seen the field yet, and then Daniel Jones. a 3-year starter there for Duke. He comes in and has already looked great there for Duke. Now granted, he's was a 6th overall selection, but Gardner Minshew and Daniel Jones have seen a lot of action out there on the field, as opposed to the likes of Kyler Murray just having 1 year really under his belt there at OU, and then Dwayne Haskins, the redshirt sophomore, 1 year under his belt as the starter there at Ohio State. So when we're looking at and evaluating positions, let's not just get wrapped up in the guys that are going to be taken in round number 1, round number 2. A lot of the guys that get taken on day 3 are those diamonds in the rough, and those are the guys that you don't want to miss out on. So when we're talking about these players and we're looking at these picks and such as we go through this draft process, just keep that in mind. These are some of the guys that may step up. But, right now, a lot of the younger quarterbacks, there's a lot of question marks. Baker Mayfield, is he all hype, or is there substance behind it? I think that offensive line needs to be upgraded. You look at a guy like Baker Mayfield, and yes, he needs to step up in the pocket. I mean, please just step up in the pocket. Don't roll out. Don't continue to try to roll right. You're not that athletic, in terms of the NFL game, to be able to get outside. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't work that way. You're going to have to stay within the pocket to make the plays. At the same time, Baker Mayfield can't be running for his life. That offensive line, I think John Dorsey, we're going to see him upgrade that. So, you look at these younger quarterbacks and, who's may have the higher ceiling. Kyler Murray may have the higher ceiling. Dwayne Haskins may have the higher ceiling, but who's NFL ready right now? Guys like Gardner Minshew, guys like Daniel Jones, who have been out there on the field for quite some time. So when we look at the quarterback position, first and foremost, I mean, I look at Tua Tagovailoa and come on. The 6'1", 218-pound junior, this is his second full year as a starter there at Bama. And, there's no question. I watched him play against South Carolina, 28-36, 444 yards and 5 touchdowns against the Gamecocks. He just the poise. Come on, his anticipation, the ball placement. There was an RPO, read a quick slant, opening in the zone, hit Henry Ruggs in stride, let him accelerate away from the defense. 81-yard touchdown. He takes what the defense gives him. Looks downfield, will take the check down if it's there. Just so patient as well, allows the receivers to come across the formation, hits them in stride, allows them to make plays after the catch. I think that's one of the things that you can really appreciate about Tua's game is he does a great job throwing his receivers open, and allowing them to make those plays. And any receiver is going to love to have a quarterback that's able to do that. He does have decent arm strength, shows that he's able to throw the football to the wide side on a line. hitting his receivers, like I said, in stride. The slants, he makes sure to put the ball out in front of them, allowing them to make plays. Further against Southern Miss in that 49-7 route. 17-21, 193. I'm sorry, 293 yards and 3 touchdowns. I'm sorry, no, 5 touchdowns. Couldn't read my handwriting there. But 48 yards in the air to Ruggs up the seam on a vertical route. Ball hung up just a little bit, but allowed Ruggs to ultimately make a play. Didn't underthrow him at all or anything like that. Also didn't overthrow him either. Perfect finesse pass down the football field. Excellent footwork in play action. Accurate pass down the field. When you talk about the downfield deep ball accuracy, that was one of the question marks with Daniel Jones. So far, so good there. Nate Stanley of Iowa, we'll talk about him here in a minute, but deep ball accuracy, not so much. And that's where I think he's going to be hurting his draft stock. But Tua does a little bit of everything. And I think that's really what is so, it's so impressive when you watch Tua is that he's like a surgeon. He's carving up defenses, taking what the defense gives him. He's not going to force a lot of footballs. I saw a stat on ESPN, 54 touchdowns, just 1 interception against unranked opponents. I mean, come on. Are you kidding me? I mean, that's, you want to talk about efficiency, that's the way to do it right there. So Tua obviously is the guy. He's my number 1 quarterback, 77.7% completion percentage. That's 4th in the FBS behind Joe Burrow of LSU, who is making a good push to be the number 3 or 4 quarterback in this year's draft. Jalen Hurts, and then USC's freshman phenom, Keaton Slovis, who got knocked out of the Utah game with a concussion. But Tua is in a class of his own. I think Justin Herbert right now looks a lot like, reminds you a lot of Josh Allen. I think he is the Josh Allen of this year's draft class. Big, physical quarterback, excellent athleticism, can make all the throws. Accuracy can be questionable at times. I think he locks on to one receiver a lot, but there's a lot to like there, a lot of intangibles to go along with the athleticism and the physicality and the arm strength. So I mentioned as a number 3 quarterback, potentially Joe Burrow and what he's doing there at LSU, second in the country in passing yards as well at over 1,500, staggering numbers. But Jake Fromm of Georgia is right there, 6'2", 220 pounds, week 3 against Arkansas State, 17-22, 279 yards, 3 touchdowns. What's so impressive about Jake Fromm, he doesn't have the incredible size that Justin Herbert has or anything like that. But I think what Jake Fromm really does well, some of the intangibles, the pre-snap reads, being able to identify where the blitz is coming from, and being able to check out of a particular play, reading that defense, understanding, if it's zone, if it's man, what am I going to do with the football? Do I have a single high or single high safety? What am I going to do with the football? I think that's one of the things that's so impressive. He's so quick to go through his progressions as well. Ball placement to the outside, just dropping it right in over the outside shoulder. On that Arkansas State game, a 60-yard touchdown on an out to Dominic Blaylock allowed him put the ball where Blaylock could catch the ball and turn upfield after the catch. Obviously, Blaylock, a weapon that has the speed to go. Play action to George Pickens up the seam, drop the ball in over his shoulder. Ball went off of his hands, but excellent ball placement there. Good footwork in the pocket. The anticipation to throw his wide receivers open as well, much like Tua. Quick release on the slants. So he may not have the arm strength, but a lot of those intangibles, the anticipation, where he's placing the footballs for his receivers, I think that's something that's really impressive. He's patient in the pocket presence, some subtle movements. He and Tua are so good at that. Tua, nothing really seems to rattle this guy. His ability to move in the pocket is just exceptional. Just subtle movement to the left or to the right, may move forward and throw on the run, heading towards the line of scrimmage, which is a much harder throw than rolling left or right, and he makes it look effortless. But Jake Fromm is right there. I think when you're talking about the number 3 quarterback, I think you have to look at Jake Fromm. You have to look at Joe Burrow now. Jordan Love out of Utah State. I haven't gotten to watch him play yet this year, but excellent touch for a guy, a big man like that. That 6'4", 225 pounds. People are talking about KJ Costello there. I just don't see it just yet with him. So I would caution people about throwing KJ Costello in there. I haven't seen the consistency out of him just yet to really put him in the cards there. Sam Ehlinger. Let's talk about the junior there out of Texas. The 6'3", 230-pound junior led the Longhorns to a 36-30 win over Oklahoma State. In that game, 20 of 28, 281 yards, 4 touchdowns, just 1 interception. I think when you watch him, he's such a gamer. And that sounds so cliche, but he's got guts. He's got that moxie, grittiness to him. Very mobile, not afraid to tuck it and run, get the yardage that he needs, not afraid to take a little bit of a pounding when needed. I like the patience in the pocket, stands tall in the pocket, delivers his throw, not afraid of a collapsing pocket around him. Excellent touch on a pass to Devin Duvernay, the left hash to the corner of the right end zone. Just on this fade, just dropped it right in over his shoulder. Beautiful throw to the back corner of the end zone. 17-yard touchdown to Jake Smith. Really held the safety to his right, then went back to the left to Smith coming up the left seam. Just put it right on a line to his receiver. He 25 yards to the wide side to a streaking Brandon Eagles. Or he read the miscommunication between the safety and the corner, and really had a wide open receiver. And a lot of times you can misfire on those throws. Put it on a line. Didn't need to sit there and give the DBs a chance to recover and make a play on the football. Get it to your receiver. Allow him to get down the field. And Eagles ultimately returned it 73 yards for the score there for Texas. Sam Ehlinger, look, when you're talking about the quarterbacks, there are a lot of guys that are in this draft class, most of them underclassmen. So there's a chance that Sam Ehlinger could come back. Jacob Eason out of Washington, I think, is another guy who's a junior. You don't have a ton of game film for him, recent game tape, unless you want to go back to his freshman season at Georgia. So Ehlinger, it may behoove him to come back for another season. One guy who doesn't have the luxury of coming back for another season is Jalen Hurts. They're at Oklahoma, 6'2", 218-pounder. What Jalen Hurts is doing, he's putting up video game type numbers, both on the ground and also with his efficiency through the air. He's just thrown 61 passes on the season thus far, compared with Joe Burrow, who's leading the country with 80.6% completion percentage. But, Jalen Hurts, 61 passes, completing 80.3% of his passes. I don't think that was really ever a question, was, his accuracy. I don't think we really ever questioned that. But I think really the biggest thing that I had issues with was, making the right reads. What's he going to do with the football? Is he going to make the right reads? Does he know where to go with the football? Things like that. Is he going to be able to, the deep ball accuracy? One thing's for certain, he is a dynamic runner. Putting his foot in the ground, very quick. With his cutback ability, had basically 99 yards on the first drive there against UCLA. A 53-yard run. Play action. Ultimately pulled it and tucked it and ran to the outside. Speed down the sideline. Comes back, hits the tight end Grant Calcaterra up the seam for 30 yards. Tight end winds up dropping the football, but just continued. On a fourth and 3, a designed run. He starts to his. Starts to his right, gets up the field, waits for the hole, then basically cuts back to the left, bursts through that hole for a 30-yard touchdown. I think he's somebody who. I don't know that he would be someone whose game would translate to the next level in terms of his passing, because I think he's still a step behind in terms of being a quality passer. I think he's dynamic as a runner, but I would actually liken his game a little bit more to someone like Taysom Hill, a guy who could come in, can be an athlete, can play receiver, tight end, fullback, H-back, running back if you need him to, and can also fill in as a quarterback in a pinch. But I just don't see Jalen Hurts, the decision making, being able to make the right reads. To this point, obviously 80% completion percentage. I talk about knowing where to go with the football. Obviously, he's hitting the receivers, but he hasn't really had to do a whole lot. OU hasn't really played anyone to this point, and you really want to see what he's going to be able to do. Can he put the football out there to those receivers? CD Lamb, the talented receiver, just put it anywhere near him, and he's going to be able to haul in the football. But Jalen Hurts, someone who's definitely, I think, at least intriguing some scouts. All it takes is one offense to try to build, the type of spread offense to accentuate his skill set, and you could have something potentially. Nate Stanley, as I said, out of Iowa, 22 of 35 for 201 yards, had 7 carries for 11 yards and a touchdown against Iowa State in that win. All the weather delays and everything, it finally got done by the end of the night. 6'4", 245-pound senior, 20 and 9 as a starter, touchdown in 7 straight games. That streak was broken there against the Cyclones. But really the biggest thing, he does a pretty decent job on the short to intermediate routes. I think when he's on the move and he's not setting his feet, he'll sit there and have some errant throws, lead his receiver a little bit too far. That deep ball accuracy, though, that's what's going to kill him. At the next level, being able to push the ball down the football field, being able to take those shots, and Nate Stanley's going to have to prove that he can hit that with any frequency. Washington State's Anthony Gordon. This is a guy who was a 3-year backup and then beat out Gage Gubrud out of Eastern Washington. He was kind of the guy that everyone was expecting to come in and be the starter, kind of a grad transfer, much like Gardner Minshew. But Anthony Gordon beat him out, 6'3", 210 pounds, 36 of 48 for 440 yards, 3 touchdowns and an interception in a win against Houston. Did a really good job. He's another guy with the eye discipline. Held the safety in the middle of the field with his eyes and went back to the receiver down the sideline on a 24-yard touchdown. Very patient in the pocket. Allows his receivers to come free from coverage. Does a really good job escaping pressure in the pocket. So really good pocket presence. Quick throws. Gets rid of the ball quickly. Then there was a 39-yard touchdown pass to Desmond Patton, just dropped it in out in front of the receiver, allowed the receiver to really run under the football, having beaten the corner. Great ball placement. Then the next game, I didn't get to watch it, but the very next game, 9 touchdown passes, a Washington State record, versus the Bruins in a wild game where the Bruins came back to win 67-63. I need to see if I can tune into that game because that was just wild to watch. I was actually at a comedy club, when that game was going on. Was actually getting to watch Nikki Glazer and her stand-up. So missed that game, but I'm definitely going to see if I can get my hands on some of that footage. I want to at least watch some of those closing minutes there in the third and fourth quarter. So if we flip from the quarterbacks to the running backs, and the running back position, what's so interesting about it is, we just talked at the top of the podcast where the different levels and the tiers are, and these are guys, Ezekiel Elliott, and then Melvin Gordon, dealing with rookie contracts, rookie deals, and when are teams going to take those running backs? We only have one running back taken in round number 1 a season ago, and Josh Jacobs, but there is a lot of talent at the running back position. Jonathan Taylor, Travis Etienne, definitely the guys at the top of the list, along with DeAndre Swift out of Georgia. But then you have JK Dobbins. You have Najee Harris, who's really asserted himself into the running back conversation at the top. Zach Moss is a punishing running back. Eno Benjamin is a talented receiving running back. Trey Sermon out of OU is a powerful back. Cam Akers, after a disappointing sophomore season, really has bounced back. AJ Dillon, healthy at the running back position for Boston College, and he's running the ball really well. When you look at, really you have to talk about a redshirt sophomore at Oklahoma State and Chuba Hubbard, who's leading the country. And so what happens with Chuba? He's a redshirt sophomore. You have all these other guys who are likely going to enter the draft. If I'm Chuba, maybe I stick around for one more season there in Stillwater and become the number one running back prospect in the country, and likely a Doak Walker Award a finalist. Although with the way that he's playing this year, he could very well be a finalist this year. But you look at Hubbard, 642 yards to lead the country. Mentioned Cam Akers, he's at 499 yards. JK Dobbins at number 5, 477. A.J. Dillon at 468. He's sixth place. Jonathan Taylor, number 9 overall with 440 yards on the ground. So, a lot of the big name running backs are really getting it done, out there on the field. And I think that's one of the things that you really want to see. Are these backs going to be able to elevate their game week in and week out? And I think the guy who definitely does that is Jonathan Taylor out of Wisconsin. This is a guy, look, Wisconsin doesn't really play him the entire game. They don't have to. They actually have a stable of running backs now. They have Garrett Groshek. They have Bradrick Shaw. They have Nakia Watson. There are a lot of running backs in that backfield. And really, Wisconsin right now is blowing teams out. They really don't have to hand the ball off to Taylor all that much. But Jonathan Taylor against Michigan, number 13 ranked Badgers, at home against the number 11 ranked Wolverines, 23 carries, 203 yards, 2 touchdowns. Also had a catch out of the backfield for 5 yards. Look, he's showing he can do it all. You really want to see it in all facets. He's an improved pass blocker, also catching the football out of the backfield. Here's one of the plays that I think really sums up what Jonathan Taylor, run up the middle. There was really nothing there, able to bounce outside, and then you watch his acceleration away from the defense on an 18-yard gain. Really just turn nothing into something. And the acceleration, look, a 10-4 100-meter guy, and 5'11", 219 pounds, the powerful leg drive. And I think what is so impressive, he's got the lateral quickness, the lateral agility, and he doesn't lose any of that speed. Once you get him on the outside, I think what sets him apart from a guy like Travis Etienne, who definitely has the speed. You look at Travis, 5'10", 215 pounds, but I think Jonathan Taylor really is a guy who's going to run you over, frankly. If you stand in his way, he's going to run you over. He's going to punish you. And I think that's one of the things that is impressive about Jonathan Taylor. Now, Travis Etienne is the home run hitter. He's going to take the top off of defense. The vision to really pick his way through traffic between tackles. Very explosive downhill. Once he puts his foot in the ground, he's has the speed to go the distance. I don't know that he necessarily has the power that Jonathan Taylor has with the way that he runs the football. Etienne, I got to watch Clemson take on Syracuse. They're 41-6, drubbing of the Orange there in the Carrier Dome. 14 carries, 76 yards with 3 receptions for 32 yards, showing that he's an improved receiver. And so I think those two guys will battle DeAndre Swift, the 5'9", 215-pound junior out of Georgia. 9 carries for 76 yards, 2 receptions for 64 yards and a touchdown against Arkansas State. Excellent vision, lateral agility to make cuts in the open field. Shows really good hands. There was a catch that he had to make on his back hip. Able to catch the football out of the backfield, turn upfield and make a play. Has a wiggle, a little bit of a wiggle there between the tackles. Speed to the outside, vision to really see the hole, put his foot in the ground and get north and south. I think that's one of the things that I was really impressed with was just the ability to put his foot in the ground. The hole opens up to the left. He's up the middle, puts the foot in the ground at the second level, makes a lateral cut to juke the linebacker down the sideline for 39 yards. There was a screen pass, down the sideline. 2 defenders tried to make arm tackles, kept his balance and the speed to go the distance, 48 yards for the touchdown. I think his balance after contact, runs through contact. That's something that you really want to see out of your running backs there at the next level. JK Dobbins out of Ohio State, mentioned him as another running back. 22 carries, 193 yards, and 3 touchdowns against Indiana added 4 receptions for 11 yards and another touchdown. This is someone who is really trying to show that he's going to be a 1,000-yard rusher yet again for the Buckeyes, and he should be mentioned in this conversation. Again, another guy has a nice little wiggle there on the outside, runs through contact, the forward lead, runs behind his pads, does a good job following his blockers through the hole. Very patient runner. He and Jonathan Taylor, I think, are two of the more patient runners in this draft class. Picks his way through traffic. Let's see, stiff arm on the outside on a 54-yard run, lateral cuts to make defenders miss in the open field. I think those are some of the things that really jumped out for me. Now, as I go through, my notes, I would be remiss if we didn't mention Najee Harris. And look, I said let's pump the brakes on the Najee Harris hype because he was number 2 rusher behind Damian Harris, ahead of Josh Jacobs for Bama, but I really wanted to see what was he going to do with the spotlight, as the number 1 rusher. 6'2", 230 pounds. You worry about, okay, is this going to be another Trent Richardson? Is it going to be a Bo Scarborough type of guy? Or is he going to be somebody who can really transition and make the plays at the next level? Definitely a punishing runner, lowers the shoulder to finish runs. 4th and 3 from the 43. A catch down the sideline. That was just look, 4th and 3 from the 43. Crossing route, catches the football, gets down the sideline through DJ Wonnum, who's a 260-pound linebacker, threw him down at the 30. Speed down the sideline, then able to hurdle R.J. Roderick at about the 16, I think it was about the 16-yard line, ran through another tackle and into the end zone. Just excellent power, the athleticism, that run, that catch right there showcased a little bit of everything. He showed you the speed, he showed you the power, the athleticism to hurdle a defender, again, the leg drive to finish the run. A little bit of everything there out of Najee Harris. He's really trying to cement himself as one of the better backs and should be in conversation for one of the top backs in this draft. Just 7 carries for 36 yards against South Carolina, but 5 receptions for 87 yards and 2 touchdowns. Really limited as a receiver. A season ago, but this year already showcasing that he can really catch the football out of the backfield. 14 carries, 110 yards against Southern Miss. Also had a reception for a touchdown in that game as well. I noted, really runs with a low pad level, excellent balance, runs through contact, jump cut in the backfield, vision to see an opening to the outside on a designed inside run. Ran an out route for a 5-yard touchdown, showed really good hands, hauling in a pass there on that play. To me, I look at Najee Harris, and he has to be mentioned in the conversation now. I was a little late to the party, late to the game with him, but he's somebody who definitely is improving week after week. Now, Zach Moss, he's second in Utah history in rushing, and barring any catastrophic injuries, I think he needs just under 200 yards to become the all-time leading rusher there for the Utes. But this is a guy who just can't seem to stay healthy. Had a shoulder injury there against USC at the start of the second quarter. Really ended his day. But look, when Zach Moss is healthy, more broken tackles than any other FBS running back. Very powerful leg drive. The talented sophomore linebacker for USC, Pala Ie Naote shot in off the edge, hit his legs behind the line. He just ran right through it. Just excellent balance for this guy. 534 carries coming into that game for over 3,000 yards, 5.6 yards per carry, and 27 touchdowns. I really, the power, the powerful running style for him. I think that's one of the things that is very impressive. Very physical runner. I just hope that he can stay healthy, because if he can, I think he could definitely help an NFL franchise. Eno Benjamin out of Arizona State, 5'10", 210 pounds, not as big as some of these other guys. A junior, could come back for a senior season, may not be a bad idea. Versus Michigan State, 11 carries for 38 yards and a touchdown. What's really remarkable about Benjamin, very quick feet. I noted that excellent balance, good hands out of the backfield. 16-yard gain, a jump cut to his right, then foot in the ground, gets up the field. Shows a little shake to get the safety to whiff on a tackle. Showed excellent effort on a downfield block to spring his quarterback, the freshman Jalen Daniels, for extra yards. I think Benjamin. There are just so many running backs in this draft class. Especially a lot of guys who are juniors. And it may behoove Benjamin to take a look at who is coming out. He may, along with Chuba Hubbard, come back for one more year. Now Trey Sermon out of OU, 6 foot, 216-pound junior against UCLA, 7 carries for 51 yards in that game. Very patient runner, follows his blockers between the tackles, does a good job picking up the corner blitz as well. You really want to see that out of your running backs. Not really used a whole lot in the running game, but of course with Jalen Hurts only throwing the ball 61 times, you don't see a ton of that running the football. But Trey Sermon, another guy who could come out in the draft, but a lot of the guys up there at the top, if you're a junior or redshirt sophomore, let's say, you're not, if you're not going to be taken, in round 1, top of round 2, possibly even round 3, then I'd probably look at coming back. And when you have such a log jam at the running back position, you're going to really run into some issues there. So Chuba Hubbard, let's just talk about him for a second. 6'1", 207 pounds, redshirt sophomore. First 3 games of the season, averaged 22 carries, 173.7 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Was leading the country in rushing yards going into the Texas game. 37 carries for, let's see, what is that? 121 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game as well. This is a guy, very strong lower body, steps out of arm tackles, foot in the ground, gets north and south in a hurry. Very much a one cut and go type of a guy. And look, we all know now why Justice Hill lost some of his playing time to this guy. He's actually as good as advertised. So that's the running back position. That's what I got to watch over the last couple of weeks. If we turn to the wide receiver position now, obviously the wide receiver position, number 1 on the list is going to be Jerry Jeudy. 6'1", 192 pounds, out of Alabama, the junior, just 6 receptions for 66 yards against South Carolina. But, he does a great job making the first man miss. We know that he's an excellent route runner. 3 straight games of 100-yard reception, or I'm sorry, 100-yard games that was snapped after that game there against the Gamecocks. Yards after contact, absolutely. Blocked to spring Henry Ruggs on that 81-yard touchdown pass that I mentioned. There was a slant, block on a running. There's a block on a cornerback, allowing springing Najee Harris for a 43-yard touchdown. He's somebody who, when you're talking about a wide receiver, you've got guys who can be the vertical threat, but they're not always going to be that sudden guy in and out of their cuts. And I think it's special when you find a receiver who can do a little bit of everything. And that's really what Jerry Jeudy's able to do. He's able to create that separation and, also can get vertical on you as well. 6 receptions, 96 yards, 2 touchdowns against Southern Miss. Just the routes, his ability to get open, uses a quick head fake to the outside to set up his post, really, that stem and able to get a free release, gets to the inside on a post route, and really just makes it look effortless. Really just some subtle moves to really throw the corner off. And I mentioned separation, and Terry McLaurin. I had him at one point penciled in as a first round pick of Seattle Seahawks. Thought that he fit like a Doug Baldwin type of receiver. Ultimately went in the 3rd round to Washington, but the first receiver with 5 receptions and a touchdown in each of his first 3 games in the NFL. And again, one of my favorite receivers in the draft. And the big thing there is separation. His ability to get in and out of his breaks, create separation from the defensive back. That's really what makes a difference at the next level. And take a look at what Marquise Brown is doing. his first game, 154 yards and 2 touchdowns, I want to say off the top of my head, in his first game, pairing up with Lamar Jackson. So his ability to create separation deep, with that deep speed. And so I've come around finally on Henry Ruggs, 6 foot, 190 pound junior there for Bama, 6 receptions, 122 yards against South Carolina. Mentioned that quick slant, catches it in stride, really accelerates from the defensive backs and across the field for an 81-yard touchdown. Excellent balance after the catch as well. But he's a guy he's able to separate. I think that quick acceleration, speed kills at the next level, and Marquise Brown was able to showcase that. I think Henry Ruggs really solidified himself as probably the number 2 wide receiver that's going to be taken in this draft. 4 receptions, 148 yards, and 2 touchdowns against Southern Miss. Catch on a stop route. Plants, gets inside the corner and gets up the field for a 12-yard gain. Ran a slant, speed and acceleration. That's the thing. Tua just has to get the ball in his hands and allows him to do everything else. 48-yard touchdown off of that slant. At one point, the broadcast, let's see, I think it was ESPN that was covering the game. Noted that he had 72 receptions and a rush and 21 touchdowns in his career. And then he happens to shortly after that run a 74-yard touchdown up the seam, ran by the defensive back on a slant and go. Kind of had to throttle down a little bit, turn, catch the ball, and then accelerate away from the defensive back again. I think that was one of the things that was so impressive was he throttled down a little bit, ultimately able to adjust to the football, high point it, come back down, and then accelerate away from the defensive backs. They didn't stand a chance. Henry Ruggs really right now is my number 2 wide receiver. Obviously, we still have a long way to go in the season, but Henry Ruggs, I think there's legit 4.2 speed there. Tylan Wallace, Oklahoma State, 6 foot, 185 pound, Blitnikoff Award, finalist from a season ago versus Texas. Wallace, for him, kind of a subpar game. I guess you could say 5 receptions for 83 yards. When you're talking about the receivers and Tylan Wallace, he came into the game as a nation's leading receiver. Now sitting there at 473 total yards, 6 touchdowns though on the year, and those 6 touchdowns, second. Tied for second in the country with the likes of Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Byrd out of Hawaii, who had a 4-touchdown game to start out the season. But he's somebody, to me, I watch him run. He knows how to get open. Just a guy who just has a knack for getting open. The route running ability is what's so special for him. He had a contested catch. I thought what was really impressive. Adjusted to the ball. Basically on a go route, able to elevate, turn, contort his body, able to haul in the pass and make the catch over 2 defensive backs. I thought that was one of the things that was really impressive. I think Caden Stearns was the one that was covering him and was able to go up and get that football over the DB Stearns. Excellent concentration on that. Good route running ability. Very sudden on a comeback route. And then extended his hands overhead on a play. He ran a square in, and ball was kind of thrown a little bit behind him. I think they were kind of throwing the ball away from the middle of the field, away from the defender. Able to extend, full extension, and really kind of show off his catch radius, hauling the football in, and able to get up the field after that. So, Tylan Wallace to me could very well end up being the number 3 wideout because, again, separation. CeeDee Lamb, for Oklahoma, you got to watch him against UCLA. And, one of the things that I'll say about CeeDee Lamb, another guy who's consistent. He was a guy that, when Marquise Brown went down to injury a season ago, he was Kyler Murray's go-to target. Excellent route running ability, for another guy, 6'2", 189 yards. He starts across on a drag, then ultimately gets deep on an over route, gets wide open across the field, catch on the move, 39-yard touchdown. Pitch took a pitch, got to the edge on a 14-yard touchdown, cut inside the defensive back on the outside for the score. Total for him on the day, just one reception for 39 yards and a touchdown, and that carry that he had for the touchdown as well. And CeeDee Lamb really didn't have to do a whole lot against UCLA, but you see the ability to go up and get the football, attack the football at its highest point. The catch radius is absolutely there. I think CeeDee Lamb and T. Higgins will kind of be battling with each other for that next receiver spot. T. Higgins, 6'4", 205 pounds for Clemson, 7 receptions, 150 yards versus Syracuse. A downfield threat. Those deep throws, able to elevate over the corner, just pluck the ball out of the air with both hands, able to avoid the first man on a drag route, then able to cut up the field. 50-yard gain on a catch up the sideline, able to pluck it out of the air with his hands, cuts back inside the defensive back, and really had outside leverage coming across the field. 56-yard gain on that play. And he's somebody who has the length. You really question, all right, so how fast are T. Higgins and CeeDee Lamb? What are their 40 times? I think you're going to see them run under 4.5, which will be just fine for bigger receivers like them, and just really dynamic, playmakers. Laviska Shenault out of Colorado. When you look at Laviska and what he's doing, he reminds you, a little bit of maybe an Anquan Bolden or a Juju Smith-Schuster. I don't know that he's necessarily the fastest guy in the world, but just 12.8 yards per reception in his career is the what he's totaling right now, and he runs a lot of underneath routes. I think that's one of the things that really jumps out. He left the last game that he played in with an unspecified injury. He's questionable for the game against Arizona on October 5th. So durability, there are definitely questions. He didn't play the entire season last year. So Laviska can definitely be a dynamic playmaker. Over 1,000 yards receiving in just 9 games the season ago, had 86 receptions. But, is he somebody who can be dynamic and be that guy who's going to stretch defenses? Didn't really see a whole lot of that, and that's one of the things that's a little alarming, and that's why he's kind of moving down my draft board just a little bit. One guy who's really jumped to the forefront, I think, is Michael Pittman out of USC, and the performance that he had against Utah. The number 10 ranked Utes come into the Coliseum. USC takes them out. I was at that game, and Michael Pittman, 10 receptions, 232 yards, and a touchdown in that game. Obviously a big target on the outside, but really what was so impressive was his ability to just go up and attack the football in the air. He was battling corners. He had I want to say it was a 76-yard touchdown, and it was a 3rd and 10 play, and you're watching this throw and you're wondering, all right, why is he putting this up here? But you know what? He threw the football up to Michael Pittman, a guy who is 6'4", 220, 230 pounds, stronger than most of the DBs that he's going up against. And he's going to out-jump you. And he went up for the football and high pointed the ball over the corner, and Julian Blackman coming over. Blackman really kind of whiffed on him and fell down, and ultimately Michael Pittman able to take it in for a touchdown. Also on a go route, really an inside fade. And, that's one of the things I think he does really well is those inside fades, but ran an inside fade route, got separation on Tariq Lewis, the corner, tracked the ball very well over his shoulder, made a catch that ultimately led to Marquise Stepp's touchdown that sealed the deal for the Trojans. But just a guy who was just dominant, 42-yard fade, and a 76-yard touchdown. But it just seemed like every time the Trojans needed something, he was the guy. He was someone that they were going to be going to, every step of the way. Stop routes, able to catch the football, and really kind of back him. There was on that stop route, kind of backed himself into a touchdown, into a first down. Just really a weapon over the middle of the field, comes back to the football, excellent blocker on the outside as well. Against BYU, he showed off excellent concentration in the corner of the end zone. Kind of a controversial call a little bit. Right foot went out. Really did look like he was forced out by the corner, but got his left foot back in bounds. Fell into the corner of the end zone for a touchdown. Strong with the ball in his hands, as I mentioned. Downfield block, against the corner in the running game, and will also do that to free up his receivers down the field as well. Pittman is a guy, to me, I think should be a day 2 pick. And if he falls to day 3, I think someone could end up getting a steal, because this is a guy who can make plays down the football field. Brian Edwards, another guy, 9 receptions, 79 yards against Alabama. Did a really good job using his big body to shield the ball from defensive backs. Showed a little bit of speed on the edge. Finishes his runs, wants to lower the pad level, not afraid to go over the middle and make a tough catch. Ran by Trevin Diggs over the top on a skinny post. So Brian Edwards is someone to keep an eye on. And one final name at the receiver position. How about Sage Surratt? 6'3", 215-pound redshirt sophomore, number 2 in the country in receiving yards, 484, trails only Antonio Gandy Golden, and I've mentioned him before from Liberty. He's a guy to watch out for. 24 receptions, 544 yards, and 4 touchdowns on the year for Gandy Golden. But Sage Surratt, 9 receptions, 164 yards, and a touchdown against the Tar Heels. Ultimately, decent blocker on the outside. I think a lot of these big receivers do an excellent job with that. Contested catches over the middle, using his body to shield the defenders from the football. 42-yard gain on a go route. Corner was on his hip, able to show off some late separation, extending, a long arm, extending the ball, really hauled in the pass over his shoulder, tracked the football very well. I think he's getting better as a route runner, and just, not afraid to go over the middle. He's showing that he can stretch defenses vertically. He's a name to watch out for if he doesn't decide to come out, because he is draft eligible, because he's been out of high school for 3 years as a redshirt sophomore. If he decides to come back, he'll be one of the guys to be talked about as one of the top receivers in that draft class. The tight end position, didn't get to see, too many tight ends play. I know, Jared Pinkney has kind of struggled a little bit there at Vanderbilt. At one point only had 9 receptions on the year. I think that was through 3 games. Colby Parkinson, though, really kind of showing off some of his receiving skills, both he and Albert Oweh-Bunam. But in weeks 3 and 4, got to watch Bryce Hopkins, a 6'5", 245-pound senior out of Purdue. 4 receptions, 77 yards against TCU. Showed a really good catch on an out route. Able to get vertical after the safety slipped down. 38-yard gain. Grant Calcaterra, the 6'4", 240-pound tight end there for Oklahoma, the junior, against UCLA. Drop the pass, and that's one of the things that I think he really needs to watch out for, is the fact that he does battled some drops a season ago as well. But Calcaterra is a guy who can be a weapon for you. 2 receptions for 40 yards there in that game against the Bruins. So we've made it through all the skill position receivers. We kind of take a look at the offensive line now. And when we talk about the offensive line, we're talking about offensive tackles. And I think, Andrew Thomas, 6'5", 320-pound junior there against Arkansas State, plays with good leverage. I think he's light on his feet, very easy mover laterally in the passing game, hand placement, inside the framework there, controlling the defensive end. But also, he's mostly known as more of a finesse tackle. But I saw some physicality out of him. Granted, he was playing against the Red Wolves, but really caving in the left side on a lot of run plays, clearing out the left side for the running backs, really gaping holes. Both he and Solomon Kinley just really clearing the way and paving the way for the running backs. Another guy to keep an eye out for is Tristan Wirfs out of Iowa, 6'5", 322-pound junior. Reminds me a lot, like I've mentioned previously, of Brandon Scherf, who was a left tackle there for Iowa. Ultimately became a guard and was the 5th overall pick of the Washington Redskins. Wirfs against Iowa State. Showed good agility heading to the second level. Needs to be under control though. Was beaten by Jaquan Bailey with quickness off the ball in the run game as well. Was playing left tackle with the injury to Alaric Jackson, moved to right tackle in the second quarter in this game, and I think that's where he's a lot more comfortable. I think he has good athleticism, moves well laterally, able to change directions, pick up the inside counter move that Jaquan Bailey was showing. He's someone to me, I think if he can really polish the run game, he's got the power, he's got the ability there. He's somebody who I think can continue to move up draft boards. Finally got to watch Lucas Niang out of TCU, the 6'7", 328-pound senior for the Horned Frogs against Purdue. Showed excellent leverage, getting under the defensive end's pad level, driving him back off the ball and down the field as well. Doesn't really take a deep angle on his kick slide, but sure covers a lot of ground, really beats the defensive end to the edge. Generates some movement with leverage and hand placement. Caved in the right side to spring running back Darius Anderson at one point. Gets under George Karlaftis. If you don't know that name, George Karlaftis, he's a 6'4", 265-pound freshman who's going to be an absolute stud for Purdue. But Niang really handed things to him. Got under his pad level, drove him toward the sideline, away from the pocket. Very good feet, sliding well, getting his hand under the pad level to stifle his rush, easily controlling him, driving him away from the pocket whenever he wanted. Niang anchors very well, not easily moved, keeps his hands inside. I think Niang is definitely an ascending prospect there. A couple of other guys to keep an eye out on. Coy Cronk out of Indiana, 6'5", 325 pounds, playing against Ohio State and Chase Young. Chase Young got to his outside shoulder on a couple of plays, but able to really kind of shove him and drive him up the field away from the pocket. Decent burst out of his stance to keep Chase Young in front of him. I thought he lunged to punch at times, would bend at his waist, but had decent feet and really able to push the defensive end up the field. Julian Good-Jones out of Iowa State, 6'5", 308 pounds against Iowa, showed really active hands against A.J. Epinesa, able to climb to the second level to get the block on the linebacker as well. Really needs to watch his pad level. Got a little high at times, and Epinesa would drive him back. Kick slide, he was really patient, waited for A.J. Epinesa to make a move, and then show the footwork to be able to keep him in front. I wouldn't always recommend that. It's kind of more of that mirror drill that you see at the combine, but he actually showed off some decent feet there with Epinesa. Josh Jones out of Houston, 6'7", 310 pounds against Washington State. Another guy who showed very, very good athleticism for a guy 6'7", light on his feet, slides well laterally in pass protection. There's a blitz coming off the edge, was able to recover, keep his body between the defensive back and the quarterback, overset at times, and defensive ends able to beat him inside. Can be physical in the ground game, but you want to see him be more consistent in the ground game. I think he's more polished as a pass protector at this point. And then Abraham Lucas, a lot of people talking about him, redshirt sophomore, potentially entering the draft. I think he needs to wait one more season. 6'7", 324 pounds against Houston, showed off those long arms, but a defensive end, really a push-pull, got him off balance, beat him off the edge. What I really liked, though, taking the speed rusher up the field away from the pocket, showed lateral quickness to pick up secondary moves as well, able to pick up inside rushers with a quick power step inside. One of the things that I was a little concerned about was some of the awareness, and that's one of the things maybe showing some of the lack of maturity at the position. Eyes got caught inside, and the defensive lineman was able to loop around to the outside to get pressure on the quarterback, really just missed that read. At the guard position, Solomon Kinley out of Georgia, I think is a guy who's moving up draft boards. He should be 6'4", 335 pounds against Arkansas State. The leverage, it was beaten, with a quick move for the defensive tackle who's kind of spun inside off the snap. But the power, the physicality, those are things that definitely jump off game film for me. John Simpson, 6'4", 330 pound left guard for Clemson. Gets a good push on the defensive tackle to his left, then able to slide laterally to pick up the linebacker back to his right. Good awareness, good lateral agility, shows leverage on short yardage plays, good leverage and pass protection as well. I think that's one of the things for him is he plays with that lower pad level, and when he does that, he's very, very effective both in the run game and in pass protection as well. You can hear me flipping through my notes. I'm somebody who loves notebooks. I've got notebook upon notebook of notes. It's just something that really helps me recall what it is that I've been watching. Ben Bredesen against Wisconsin, 6'5", 325-pound, pulled around the edge, sustained a block on the edge against the linebacker Noah Burks. I thought, pretty good athleticism, good hand usage and pass protection, but that line overall really got beat up against Wisconsin. Let's see. The center position, Tyler Biadasz. I think Tyler's still going to be the number one center taken probably in the first half of round number 1. 6'3", 321-pound junior, started every game there at Wisconsin. I think he plays played with a low pad level. There was a 3rd and short play against Carlo Kemp, really drove him back and then pancaked him kind of as a lead blocker for the running back. Showed an ability to climb to the second level, got to Josh Ross, the linebacker there, inside backer, sustained the block, ultimately forced an illegal hands to the face by the linebacker. Athletic, really pulling around. Carlo Kemp did try to shoot a gap to the inside, but really just kind of rode him up the field, knew where his quarterback was going, able to just take him right up the pocket, keep himself between the defensive tackle and the quarterback. I think he's number 1, and Creed Humphrey's number 2. I think Creed Humphrey probably going to be more towards the later, the latter half of round number 1, but a guy who just the athleticism, he's the guy that really is the leader of the OU offensive line, especially now that they've moved 4 offensive linemen on to the next level. He's really the guy that's anchoring that unit now. Looking at the defensive side of the football, obviously Chase Young is the defensive end that you have to talk about. 6'5", 265-pound junior against Indiana. One of the things that was impressive was his ability to diagnose plays. He didn't rush because he read a screen, dropped, worked through through the traffic, able to drop the running back for a loss, diagnose that play in a hurry. You saw a lot of stunts, and he was shooting through the B gap to shoot to beat the center on one play, looped around on another stunt, shot through the gap, hit the quarterback as he throws. Very physical with his hands, and that's one of the things that you talk about. I don't care if it's Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa, Chase Young, they all use their hands very well, and he's somebody who has a really high motor, keeps working to the quarterback, never gives up on a play. AJ Epinesa, against Iowa State, had just 1 tackle in a quarterback hurry, 6'6", 280 pounds. This is a guy who teams are really keying on him this year. He's not fooling anybody. I think last year you had Anthony Nelson, you had Parker Hesse, you had some of these guys to take some of the pressure off of AJ Epinesa. Now he's getting double teamed. You really need Cedric Lattimore, Chauncey Golston and company to really step up to really help him. They're coming off the edge because he is seeing some double teams. I think he does show a quick burst off the ball, power in his hands, gets leverage, under the offensive lineman, like I mentioned with Julian Good Jones, able to drive him back into the backfield, dips that inside shoulder to beat the left tackle, close on the quarterback with a slap and rip, and then kind of dips that shoulder. But he's not the most explosive guy in the world, but he reminds you a little bit of a J.J. Watt type of a player. Yetur Gross-Matos, 6'5", 264 pounds, for Penn State against Pitt. Uses hands very well, keep working to the quarterback, bends well off the edge, show that he can rush the passer both with his hand in the ground and as a stand-up rusher. Let's see. When you look at, and I'm just pulling up the stats for the sacks, and Chase Young tied for the lead in sacks per game with 1.75. He has 7 total sacks on the year. Curtis Weaver out of Boise State, didn't get to watch him play this in these last 2 weeks, but 6 sacks, kind of off to a slow start and really has come on of late. Yetur Gross-Matos, 3.5 sacks thus far. on the year. He's tied for eighth with 1.17 sacks per game. So some of the bigger names, those are guys that kind of stand out a little bit. But other names to mention, obviously Kenny Willekes, 6'4", 260 pounds, Michigan State against Arizona State, 7 tackles, a half a sack, 2 tackles for loss, excellent hands, gets his hands under the right tackle's pad level, drove him back into the quarterback, shot inside the right tackle and dropped the running back for no gain. Also, shortly after that, shot in again on the inside of the right tackle to drop Benjamin for no gain. It was kind of a wide 9 technique. Reminds you of kind of a younger, smaller version of J.J. Watt, has even that elbow brace that he plays with. And Michigan State, the 31-10 winners over Northwestern, rebounding off of that loss to Arizona State. Willekes, 3 tackles, 2 quarterback hurries in that game. But, stood up the running back coming through the A-gap after a 4-yard gain, uses his hands to really turn the corner against the right tackle. Quick hands, ultimately slapping the right tackle's hands aside, dips that inside shoulder, getting a quick burst, flattening out to the quarterback. I think the slap and rip move is something that he's really perfected, and that's something that you see J.J. Watt use from time to time. 3rd and 2 on a zone read, really stayed at home. Quarterback handed it off, went down the line to really wrap up the running back for no gain. Just really an intelligent player, plays with his hair on fire, and that's something that you really enjoy watching. Bradley and 6'3", 265 pounder, the senior there for Utah, played against USC, and I'll tell you that defensive line for Utah is stout, and they are mean and they are physical. Bradley and with his 21st sack of his career in that game, 5 tackles and 2 tackles for loss. Showed he could drop a little bit into coverage, can rush the passer as a stand-up defensive end as well, can bend a little bit coming off the edge. Seemed to just keep shooting inside the left tackle. Austin Jackson had just a field day. Really shoved Austin Jackson aside, threw him down, and then pursued the running back, dropped him for loss. Getting under the pad level, and then a kind of a rip move to get by coming off the edge as well. Attack the outside shoulder. This was a really fun play to watch. Attack the outside shoulder of Jackson as a stand-up defensive end. Burst coming off the ball. Extends that left arm into his chest as he's flipping his hips. Bends well to get to the quarterback. And then ultimately threw the quarterback down, as part of that 21st career sack. Carlos Basham. If you don't know the name, get to know it. Out of Wake Forest, 6'5", 275-pound junior. Really don't call him Carlos. He prefers to be called Boogie. Against UNC, 5 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss. You see the speed to power. That's one of the things that you see with him. Active hands as well to get off blocks. Good spin moves back to the inside, as a secondary move, that counter move. Dips his shoulder, getting by the defensive by the offensive lineman, runs by the running back to chase down the quarterback from the backside, gets his hand in the passing lane to knock down a pass on the very next play. Inside rush, beating the right tackle with speed, crossing his face, getting under the pad level, good hips to turn. Ultimately, chase down the quarterback there, double team and still able to get a spin move to the inside to flush the quarterback from the pocket. Left tackle oversets. Don't overset against this guy. He's going to explode through the gap to get to the quarterback. Ultimately, in this case, chop the arms quarterback as he was trying to throw the football. I think Boogie Basham is a guy, ascending prospect, a guy who could come out at the end of this year's draft or at the end of the season. If he stays and comes back, he'll be one of the top defensive end prospects. And then Jaquan Bailey out of Iowa State, 4 tackles and a pass breakup against Iowa, 6'2", 255 pounds. Second in Iowa State history in sacks. Beat Tristan Wirfs with quickness in the running game. Also, does a good job. He's got some decent arm length, getting it into the passing lane to knock down a pass there against the Hawkeyes. If we move to the defensive tackles, I think number 1 on the list has to be Derrick Brown. explosive both in the run game and against the pass. So physical with his hands. Obviously, Marvin Wilson from Florida State. I haven't gotten to see him play yet, but 6'5", 311 pounds. A lot of people talking about him. A season ago, finished the season with four tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, and just 4 games so far with the Seminoles. He has 22 total tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, and 3 sacks. That's getting it done. So I think he and Derrick Brown are the two that have really stepped up their game the most. But Javon Kinlaw isn't too far away. 6'6", 310 pounds out of South Carolina. 4 tackles and a sack against Alabama. Showed a excellent bull rush. Basically took the center back 2 steps, then ultimately dumped him on the ground. Good change of direction to chase down Tua for a sack. Very active hands. Play action by Tua, read the running back in the flat, peeled off to ultimately cover the running back. I thought, really good awareness there. Extended his arms into the right guard to bull rush him, really drove him back into the quarterback, forced Tua to throw off his back foot, incompletion. Kinlaw can affect both the run and the pass. And that's really what you're looking for the defensive tackles. Can they affect both the run and the pass? If they're able to do that, then I think there's more value at the next level. Leki Fotu, the nose tackle there for Utah, 6'5", 335 pounds, second play of the game, and he had basically an arm over move on the right guard and beat him off the snap. Big hit to Keaton Slovis under his helmet, face mask right there into the shoulder, planted him down to the ground. Would have been a penalty in the NFL with the full weight of his body coming down on the quarterback. Keaton Slovis's head ultimately hit the ground, but it was a clean hit. He's a team captain, but just a guy who was just so physical. The speed to power was evident, just that quick burst off the ball and just really driving guys back, bull rush whenever he wanted to, getting an excellent push up the field. The quick penetration I thought was really impressive, getting into the backfield to disrupt a lot of the run plays, very stout at the point of attack, having to deal with quite a few double teams, and then collapsing the pocket from within. If you can get a guy to collapse the pocket from within, then that's really going to make quarterbacks' lives miserable. And, that's one of the things I look at Leki Fotu. I think definitely impressive there. Raequan Williams, 6'4", 303 out of Michigan State versus ASU, 3 tackles and a sack. Used his hands well to shove the left guard aside. Ultimately got big, got his hands into the throwing lane to knock a pass down. Pad level will get high at times, will lose leverage. Ultimately driven away out of the pocket by the center, Cole Cabral. Saw frequent double teams, but a guy who's he's going to take up space, but he also has some explosiveness, excellent power, and against Northwestern, had 2 tackles, a sack, and 2 tackles for loss in that game. Excellent pursuit skills down the line. Does a great job, like I said, holding the point versus the double teams. Gets skinny up the field, shooting gaps. Real quick, move coming off the ball to get early penetration, disrupting run plays. May not be the guy that actually makes the tackle, but he's the guy that really makes the play. Able to come down the line off the right guard hip that was pulling around to the left, ultimately able to drop the running back for a loss in the backfield. Hands into the chest of the right guard, drove him back. Powerful strike, comes off, really gets that guy off balance and really, collapse in the pocket a little bit. So these are some powerful guys. And then Raekwon Davis, really starting to show that he can be a lot more of a complete defensive lineman. 6'7", 312 pounds out of Bama, 4 tackles and a quarterback hurry against South Carolina. Got off the right tackle block, speed to track down the running back for a tackle for loss on the outside. Stout at the point, extends those long arms into the right tackle, able to disengage, uses a quick slap and rip move to get off the right tackle block, flatten out to the quarterback from there, read a draw play, got off his block on the right tackle, able to move laterally to drop the running back for no gain. He's somebody who really kind of had a disappointing year a season ago, and I think he's showing out much better, really taking on a leadership role there on the defensive line for the Crimson Tide. Before we move on from the defensive line, one guy that I do need to make sure that I mention had a sack and a half against Clemson, and that's Charlotte's Alex Highsmith. 5 sacks on the year. He's sitting there with Jordan Mack of Virginia, sixth nationally in sacks per game. And if you haven't gotten to see Charlotte play, he's a lot of fun to watch. He's somebody who just is a high motor, high energy guy, tremendous athlete. Dabo Sweeney actually went out into the media and said that this guy was one of the best players that they've played against there at Clemson. 6'4", 242 pounds, has 32 tackles for loss, 11 sacks so far in his career in 4 games for Charlotte. For the 49ers, 19 tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 5 sacks already with a couple of pass breakups as well. We were talking about Marvin Wilson at defensive tackle. This is a guy at defensive end, and Alex Highsmith. You remember what happened with Marcus Davenport there at UTSA and the momentum that he built up. This is going to be a guy, mark my words, who's going to fly up draft boards, and we could potentially see a Charlotte 49er not only taken in the draft, I believe that would be the first since Larry Ogunjobi, but a guy who could potentially end up working his way into the first round. I think at a minimum he'll end up being a second day pick, but I think there's a good chance that you could end up seeing him taken very high. Larry Ogunjobi was taken in the third round, 65th overall of the 2017 NFL draft by the Cleveland Browns. But if we move along to the linebacker position, Isaiah Simmons out of Clemson, so athletic. This guy is going to be the number 1 linebacker taken. I mean, there's no question about it. 6'4", 230 pounds, 11 tackles, 2 sacks, 3.5 tackles for loss in Clemson's win there against Syracuse. Did an excellent job spying the quarterback in the middle of the field, explosive speed to chase him down. Lined up at depth, came running up to the line of scrimmage, shot the A-gap, dropping the running back for a loss. But I think when you look at him, he's 6'4" and 225, 230 pounds. He's kind of that hybrid running back, linebacker. And in this new age of the NFL, that's the type of linebacker that you need, a guy who's going to be able to play that safety, linebacker, that hybrid position. He can play all 3 downs. He can play the run. He can play the pass. Has excellent range, and a guy who could potentially, who knows what he's going to run in the 40. He could potentially run, in the, they're saying potentially sub 4.4, which would be tremendous for a guy his size. But you think of guys like Hassan Reddick and a lot of these different linebackers that are able to show up and really show out with all of their athleticism. I think Isaiah Simmons is going to end up being the number 1 linebacker taken in the draft when it's all said and done. So, Wisconsin, yet another linebacker that people are talking about. Joe Schobert, Vince Beagle, Garrett Dooley, a lot of different linebackers there. Zach Bond, 6'3", 235 pounds for Wisconsin, and against Michigan, he was just so much fun to watch. In every game that he plays. If you haven't gotten a chance to watch Wisconsin play, watch number 56. 7 tackles, a sack, 2 tackles for loss, 2 quarterback hurries in the game. He's just so quick coming off the edge. He just plays with, like he's got his hair on fire at all times. He's coming off the edge, high motor, high energy guy, running down running backs, from the backside. Just a guy who's just just seems to continue to get better. And, a guy that people don't really talk about. He's also a workout warrior, a guy who's really strong in the weight room. So he's going to be a guy to watch. Anthony Jennings, I think, is having a much better season for Alabama against South Carolina. 6 tackles, a sack, 2 tackles for loss, forced fumble, and quarterback hurry. 6'3", 259 pounds. Does a good job attacking the outside shoulder, with a good burst off the ball, then a rip as he's turning the corner to ultimately chase down and disrupt the quarterback. I think he also shows a different array of pass rush moves, not just using a rip move. He'll use a good arm over, good slap and rip as well, club move, Uses his hands, getting off blocks. I think that's really one of the things that you definitely see with Anthony Jennings. Had a rip move to beat the left tackle coming around the edge, got to the quarterback in the pocket, chopped his arm to force a fumble. How about Joe Bocci there for Michigan State against ASU? 12 tackles, a half a sack, pass breakup, and a quarterback hurry in that game. Showed an ability to drop into coverage, read the quarterback's eyes, took him to the football, took off downhill, he does a good job blitzing, shows range sideline to sideline, ultimately able to string out Eno Benjamin in that game, read an underneath route across the field, able to drop, read the route, got a hand up to knock the pass down. Joe Bocci, underrated athleticism, I think. Justin Strnad, out of Wake Forest, 6'3", 235 pounds, 15 tackles, a sack, and a pass breakup against UNC. Excellent range, showed an ability to drop in coverage, decent hips, spying the quarterback, third down play, speed to chase the quarterback outside the pocket for a sack. And then how about Patty Fisher? 9 tackles and a tackle for loss in that 31-10 loss against Michigan State, but diagnoses very quickly, moves well laterally, gets in position with outside leverage. A guy who shoots the holes very well. Showed decent hips, dropping into coverage. That's another thing that really stood out. There was a pop pass as well to Darrell Stewart to the outside. Ran the alley well, got to the outside, dropped him in the open field for a loss of 8 yards. Patty Fisher's a guy who I think has a chance if he decides he wants to come out because he's only a junior. If he decides to come out, he'll be one of the top linebackers taken in the draft. At the cornerback position, didn't get to see my top corners, Bryce Hall or Paulson Adebo. Did get to see Trevin Diggs though, 6'2", 207 pounds, out of Alabama. 3 tackles against South Carolina from bump and run coverage, able to turn and run with the receiver, looking lean, in phase, no separation whatsoever. Drives on throws on an out throw. Win in motion with Brian Edwards, 3rd and 5. Bail technique, wide receiver snapped an out route at the sticks, able to flip his hips and drive to the football. Also showed a good job getting off blocks to get to the receiver. He's a guy who is going to be in that conversation as a potential first rounder. Jeff Gladney out of TCU against Purdue, 6 foot, 183 pounds, had 2 tackles, a pass breakup, and an interception. Stays low in his back pedal, has good ball skills, also was on both the punt and punt return team as well. Let's see, Sean Wade, 6'1", 194 pounds, out of Ohio State. The redshirt sophomore against Indiana, really starting to make a name for himself, flies around to the football, quick throws, not afraid of contact. So he's somebody who I think is an ascending prospect. I thought Jalen Johnson got beat a few times there against USC, against those talented receivers, but also showed that he was, an ability to stay, really not allow any separation, and got called for a pass interference play that really wasn't pass interference against Tyler Vaughn's in the end zone, but really there was face guarding there, no real contact, but I think. I think Vaughn's really initiated any contact that there was there, but he needs to really watch, really look back for the football. And then looking at the safety position, Xavier McKinney, he's not Grant Delpit, but he's really making a case to be that number 2 safety coming off the board. He should be a first round pick, 6'1", 200 pounds, the junior for the Crimson Tide against South Carolina, 9 tackles, a tackle for loss, an interception as well. Comes downhill in a hurry. If there's a screen or a run play to the outside, he's coming down in a hurry, is going to, come with some bad intentions, wants to drill guys, wraps them up. Does a really good job there. Got beaten inside by Brian Edwards on a square end though. But like I said, read a pass to the tight end, Luke Markway in the flat, able to fly downhill, no yak, wrapped him up. And then, another throw to the flat downhill to Nick Muse, who's a talented tight end there for the Gamecocks. Got there in a hurry for a big hit for a loss of 1 yard on the play. Greg Eisworth out of Iowa State had 15 tackles and a pass breakup against Iowa. A guy who plays in the box, got beaten on a stick route by one of the slot receivers, but excellent, a sure tackler in the open field, good instincts. And then I mentioned Julian Blackman. He's still learning the safety position, converted corner, 6'1", 204 pounds against SC. He was the guy that fell down on Michael Pittman's long touchdown play. Tried to come over the top, was a little late, mistimed his jump, and ultimately fell down on that play. Utah ultimately going down to the Trojans 30-23. So when we look at everything here, that's kind of weeks 3 and 4 that I got to watch. I've always mentioned that I have a goal of watching at least one game for all 130 FBS programs, and obviously a few of the FCS schools as well. I'm at 87 of the 130, and we're at week 5, so I think I've got pretty good pace to go ahead and make it through all the way. So Friday's games, September 27th, if we look ahead and see some of these different matchups, we look at it, Penn State, Gross Matos and company want to see what they can do against Maryland, Josh Jackson, Anthony McFarland and company. Can Maryland rebound after that loss at Temple? Let's see, California. I didn't mention Evan Weaver. I still have it recorded. I haven't gotten to watch the game against Ole Miss. 22 tackles on the day there, and also able to stop the quarterback shy of the end zone on the last play of the game. They're taking on Arizona State, so you get to see Evan Weaver against Eno Benjamin. Looking forward to that matchup. And then on Saturday, OU, number 6 ranked Sooners, have Texas Tech at home. Really want to see what that defense can do against a spread offense there for Tech. Wisconsin at home against Northwestern. Northwestern with that, it's a staunch defense. They have Greg Newsome, have 4 pass breakups against the Spartans, showed excellent ball skills. He's only a sophomore, but a guy to, a name to know there for the Wildcats. Patty Fisher, Joe Gaziano, who we really didn't talk about, but is a solid defensive end. Reminds you a lot of Dean Lowry, who's now playing for the Packers. Can they slow down Jonathan Taylor? That's going to be the big question. Wisconsin, I really, the matchup I want to see, though, is Quintez Cephas, who's the dynamic receiver on the outside, the vertical threat for Wisconsin. I want to see him against Newsome. See that early and often. I think that's going to be a lot of fun to watch. As we go through the day, early games, what are some of the other games I want to see? Clemson taking on North Carolina. Carolina, a team who's going to be a tough out for them. How about Virginia? 4-0. Number 18th ranked Cavaliers. You've got Charles Snowden. You've got Jordan Mack, guys who can put pressure on the quarterback. There at the linebacker position, you have Bryce Hall as well. Are they going to be able to slow down the Irish? Irish played tough against Georgia, ultimately, losing that game. What can Bryce Perkins do against that Notre Dame defense? USC, 21st ranked Trojans, traveling to Washington to take on the 17th ranked Huskies. We've already seen what happened with USC the last time they traveled. They lost in overtime to BYU on an interception. Matt Fink, the quarterback, the third string quarterback that stepped in, taking on the Huskies. Now look, the Huskies in that secondary, Miles Bryant and company, they're going to have to deal with some dynamic playmakers. Michael Pittman, Tyler Vaughns, we didn't mention him, but he's a junior wideout. There on the outside, Amon-Ra St. Brown, only a sophomore, excellent slot receiver. I think USC, they've got a tremendous sophomore defensive tackle in Jay Tufele, who just really wasn't ever blocked against Utah. He's a name to watch out for next season, as is St. Brown. So the Trojans, what can they do there against Washington? Can their defense, that is kind of a bend but don't break mentality. What can they do with Jacob Eason? Is Salva and Ahmed, the running back, going to be healthy or not? That's going to be a big question there. Let's see. Charlotte, in case you want to check out Alex Highsmith taking on Lane Kiffin in Florida Atlantic. As we scroll through, Minnesota, 3-0 Golden Gophers, not always pretty, but they're still getting it done. You want to watch the receivers there, Rashad Bateman and Tyler Johnson. I'm hoping Carter Coughlin, the defensive end, can get things going. Purdue, the super sophomore, Rondell Moore, obviously is a lot of fun to watch. Marcus Bailey, the linebacker there. is another guy to keep an eye out for, as is Bryson Hopkins, the tight end. As we scroll through, Liberty, with Antonio Gandy Golden, he'll be taking on the New Mexico Lobos at home. Auburn, they're 4-0, taking on the 3-1 Mississippi State Bulldogs. You want to see what that defensive line can do, against the likes of Tommy Stevens and Kylan Hill and company there. I think Auburn ends up getting the win there, especially with that defensive line. Kansas State, with Chris Kleiman at head coach, they're ranked number 24 in the country. They're also 3-0, taking on the 3-1 Oklahoma State Cowboys. And I think the real big thing here when you're looking at Oklahoma State, Chuba Hubbard, Tylan Wallace, you got to get them going. Spencer Sanders is a running quarterback. You really want to see him air it out a little bit, target Tylan Wallace early and often there against the Wildcats. But that's a tough team, a gritty team that they're really going to have to play well against. Ohio State going into Lincoln, Nebraska 3-1 on the year. They lost that heartbreaker in overtime to Colorado. I'd be curious to see what Lamar Jackson can do against some of those receivers. Can Khalil Davis, Carlos Davis, and company Mohamed Berry, the linebacker, handle JK Dobbins? They're going to have their hands full, though, with super sophomore, Justin Fields. Let's see. Can Florida State get back on track, get back over 500? They're at 500 right now, 2-2 on the year, taking on NC State, who's 3-1. It looks like Florida State slowly getting that build going. They're being led by the ground game of Cam Akers and getting Marvin Wilson going. They're on the interior of that D-line. Washington State traveling to Utah to take on the number 19 Utes. You really want to see is Zach Moss healthy? But tune in and watch that defense. That defensive line is going to give Anthony Gordon trouble. I think Utah ends up coming away with the victory. Tyler Huntley is an athletic quarterback. But I think really it's going to be that defense. I want to see how that secondary plays. Jalen Johnson, Julian Blackman really want to redeem themselves. And they'll get a chance to do that against Anthony Gordon, Desmond Patton and company there. And then rounding out, you've got the 3-1 Nevada Wolfpack taking on the 3-1 Hawaii Warriors. Hawaii with that dynamic receiver combo of Cedric Byrd and JoJo Ward, going to be fun to watch. And then UCLA. They're 1-3. Have they salvaged their season with that big win over Washington? Is that going to give them Washington State? Is that going to give them momentum? They'll be taking on Arizona, who's 2-1 on the year. Their only loss was week 0 against Hawaii. Getting to watch Khalil Tate, Colin Schooler, the linebacker there, getting to go up against DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson there for the Bruins. So that will be kind of what to expect in week number 5. And that brings us to the end of the Ready for the Draft podcast. This is episode 7. Hard to believe that we're already at episode 7. We're talking about the last weekend of college football in September. Next week's going to be October. The season's already flying by. It's unreal. We'll be talking about bowl season before we know it. So enjoy the college football season while it's still here. We're going to really get into some of the conference play there in October, and that's really when you want to see some of these guys have some of those breakout games. Who are going to be the guys that are going to take the reins and really establish themselves as first round targets? And I think when you're really evaluating a lot of these different positions, and you want to see who's making a difference at the next level right away. We've talked about some of the receivers, Marquise Brown, and you've seen what he's able to do. You see what Gardner Minshew is able to do coming out. Before him, it was Baker Mayfield. Some of those dynamic quarterbacks, that moxie that they have, guys that have played, a lot of football at the quarterback position might be able to make the transition a little bit easier than some of the younger quarterbacks. So I don't think that's going to affect guys like Tua, like I've mentioned earlier. And then at that receiver position, the dynamic ability, stretching defenses, being able to separate, whether it's vertically or with your running ability. Those are things that you're going to want to see. The linebackers, Darius Leonard, you're looking for guys who are instinctive, guys who can make plays. Who are the guys who can be that 3-down linebacker who can drop into coverage, sideline to sideline range, can cover a little bit? Those are guys that you're going to be looking for. And obviously the cornerbacks out on an island, are they able to make plays? Are their ball skills? And you know what? The guy that you also have to keep an eye out for are some of those slot corners, the nickel corners. Nickel Roby-Coleman, not the biggest guy in the world by any means, but a guy who is just dynamic there in the slot for the Rams. So that's kind of what I'm going to be taking a look at. I want to see whose game can really translate to the next level, and what we're really looking at. So in the coming weeks, we'll be having more conversations about that and what that really looks like. So hope you've enjoyed the podcast. I'm back and really have enjoyed, the last couple of weeks, really bringing everything together to bring this podcast to you. Hope you've enjoyed the ride. Enjoy the weekend of college football. Obviously, you'll have pro football on Sunday and Monday as well. We'll go ahead and do this again next week. So again, enjoy your weekends. Tune in next week for the next edition of the Ready for the Draft podcast. I am Gregg Schutze. Until then, everyone, take care, and I am out of here.